what your financial advisor isn't telling you. That's the topic for today's episode. And without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode at Novarise Invest. For those who are tuning in for the first time, this is your channel for financial education. So today we have a very special guest in our program, and he's here to tell us what is it that you should be looking out for when it comes to working with a financial advisor. And without further ado, let's just welcome him to our program today. And here we are with our amazing guest, Bronson Hill. Bronson, welcome to our channel today.
Well, Celia, I'm so excited to be here, be with your audience. I know you guys love talking about finance and all things related to personal investing and all types of stuff. So really excited to be with you guys.
Likewise, we're very excited to have you on board. So for those who don't know Bronson is currently a full-time real estate investor. He recently quit his job, and in his former life, he used to be a financial advisor. And so what we agreed to do today is to have him on board today and share the ins and outs of what it was like to be in that industry and what you can do with that information for your financial benefit. So without further ado, let's just dive into the questions. So tell me, Bronson, what are some of the things that as a financial advisor, you don't want your clients to know in your former life, in your past life, of course?
Yeah, so a little bit of my story. I was an investment advisor, and I love helping people. I have kind of a sales background, did some medical sales, working with doctors and patients. And when I was working as an investment advisor, I started to kind of see behind the curtain, almost the Wizard of Oz kind of thing, where it's the pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You start to see things that are kind of unattractive, and it really comes down to things like conflict of interest. And what I mean by that is that you're pushing people to buy products that you sell, and there's a lot of times hidden fees in there. And it's like when you go to a car lot or you go to a place to buy a car, the person selling you the car is not unbiased in what kind of car you should buy. And so it's very similar in this type of thing. When somebody's giving you financial advice, they're considered an expert, and yet they're selling you a product. And so I think it's always something to be concerned about when someone wants to sell you anything, just what the motives are behind that. And somebody can be very altruistic and say, hey, I have this other person's best interest in mind. But a lot of times there's pressure both from the different institutions or whatever institution you work for, or there's pressure just from Wall Street itself to really push people into what I call paper assets, such as stocks and bonds. And over the years, what's happened is these firms, at least in the US, they're multi-billion-dollar firms that spend so much money to educate you that stocks and bonds are safe, and that they actually use the term traditional. But the challenge with traditional investments being stocks and bonds is they can crash within a 12-month period. They can go down 50%, and it's happened multiple times over the last 50 to 100 years. So to me, I don't see any investment that could crash 50% as being something that's low risk. And so I guess when I started to uncover the world of real estate, I started to uncover the world of alternative investing, which I think should be called traditional investing, and buying real assets. It really opened my eyes to see just how biased I was and just wanting to push people into paper assets and stocks and bonds.
Thank you. That was actually a great introduction, a great way to kind of like set the tone for everybody to kind of like get an idea of the reality behind the scenes, right? Because most customers or most people in general think that they cannot make it in the investing world unless they do it with a financial advisor. For some, that might be true to a certain degree, but there's still a level of education that the customer has to engage in to a certain degree, so that way they can decide, wait, is this investment really good for me? Is it really truly for my benefit? Or is there some kind of conflict of interest behind the scene because maybe the expert in this case is experiencing some level of pressure that the customer is not truly aware of. So we already talked about the conflict of interest. What about the fees that goes behind it? Like, are they truly fully disclosed on the documents that everybody signs, or is it something that they should be looking into with a magnifying glass to see what else is hidden in there?
Right. So, Lucilia, I think fees are really important to talk about. I want to take just one step back real quickly, something you said about just the idea of understanding your own investments. And what it's really interesting, a lot of people think that, being an investment advisor, it's like being a brain surgeon, right? You trust the pro to do it. You never do brain surgery on someone you love or on yourself, but you go to a physician that focuses on that. So an investment advisor is like that. Like they're a super specialist. You can't manage your own money. You have to have somebody else do it. But in reality, you are the only one that cares substantially about your own investing. That's why financial education and financial literacy is so important, because people can get you into investments, but what happens as an investment advisor, you have a responsibility. You actually kind of you do different certifications saying that you want to put people into what's called a suitable investment. So it just has to be something that fits your risk profile. It's this certain equation just saying you've got to be this amount of stocks and bonds and different things. But in reality, there are much better investments that have higher returns. But people, you can't necessarily encourage them to go into those things because they don't have the sophistication, they don't have the financial education to be able to learn about them. So that's why reading books about financing, watching Novarise, watching your channels are so important, because it allows you to actually take control of your finances and actually get eventually to a place where you have financial freedom. And so I didn't really realize that's true, but I think a guy like Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, talks a lot about financial education and financial literacy. So that's really, really, really important. So kind of on that vein, you're talking about fees when it comes to working with an investment advisor. And this is something that I didn't even realize, even being an investment advisor. And I learned about it in the process. And this is part of the reason I had to leave. So in general, Tony Robbins, who's a motivational speaker, came out with a book, and it's called Money Master the Game. And basically, he said the average mutual fund will say their fees are between 1.2% and 1.4% per year. Not too bad, right? But he said there's all these hidden fees that they don't disclose, and legally they don't have to disclose them. So there are things like administrative fee, the cash drag fee, the exchange fee, the marketing fee, all these just fees they kind of make up names for. And the average actual fees in the fund is actually more like 3.2%. So it adds all these fees on top of it. In addition to that, if you go see a financial advisor, they'll typically take somewhere between 1.5 and 2% on all of your investments as well. So now you're basically, if you do the math there, you're looking at between 5 and 6% just in fees to be able to get into different types of products. And the stock market as a whole typically only has around a 6 to 8% average annual return per year. So it basically becomes a bank account. And most people don't realize this, that you can have all your money in some sort of, a lot of wealthy people do. They'll have a money person that kind of manages their money, and they'll, I'll just send over the money person. But it really is effectively, you could pretty much get the same result by putting it in the bank.
Yes, I definitely couldn't agree with you more. I think either you and I, to a certain degree, have experienced it with our own money, because when we come out of college, we get a job. That's pretty much the first thing our employer tells us to do, right? Like invest your money on paper assets, open up a 401k, which it's in essence kind of like the same thing when you come to think about it, because you can't really do anything with your money. You still have a fund manager to manage your 401k money. And then it's just as limited as the type of investments that you are actually talking about. And to a certain degree, I realized when I started reading the fine print, all of those tiny little hidden fees that you will never even think about until you start doing the math, and those they do add up eventually. And so what you wind up getting, it's a nominal number, right? A number that actually looks good on paper because it's inflated, because it's adjusted for inflation and whatever is it like expertise that they're providing to you that's making that money grow. But then eventually when you start cashing it out or taking distribution, then that's when everything gets discounted, and you realize that almost you will wind up with the exact same money as if you would have just started off originally. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of calculations people make is that, they don't really count the fees in there, and the fees are obviously a big part of it. Even if you buy index funds, you're going to deal with a lot of volatility. So when you count volatility, that also reduces overall returns. You can't just say, oh, the market went up 15 or 20% this year and then it went down 10% next year, whatever is it, that even the volatility affects the return substantially. So when you actually look at what you end up with after fees and volatility and other things, it's never as good as what they say it is. And that's the challenge with investing in things that you really don't fully understand. So I'm not saying stocks and bonds are bad for every person in every situation, But it is really important that people get educated on what the fees are, on the structure, and continuing to learn about different assets outside of Wall Street.
Yes, completely agree with you. We're all different and we all have different risk tolerance. We all have different preferences. Some of us have jobs that are extremely demanding, and perhaps we don't have the time to go out there and actively, let's say, flip a house or something like that, right? But before we talk about flipping houses and the kind of work that you do in real estate, let me just take a step back, because you did mention something about real assets versus paper assets. And there's always seemed to be kind of like a war, right? Every time you talk about investments with somebody who has their heart set on paper assets, stocks, and versus someone who it's, heavily vested in real estate, there's always that I guess you can call it a cultural clash, so to speak, because like everyone feels very strongly about the type of investment that they do. So let's say, for example, if I were a big stocks fanatic and I came into you and I say, hey, Bronson, look, I get what you're coming from. I do invest in the stock market, and I've been getting, a return of like 140% or something like that. That looks pretty real to me. So what do you mean by my assets are not being real? And what is it that real estate has that makes it real that I cannot say the same about my type of investment? I don't know if I throw a bomb out there, but like I do get this argument a lot from people who are set in the stock market.
Yeah, so again, I don't look at any asset class as like one is good or one is evil or anything like that. You can use anything. I sometimes will invest in stocks or other sorts of paper assets, but it is important to know that for what you're actually buying is you're buying something that's not a physical asset. So you're buying something that has something called counterparty risk. That means that if the business fails, or if the financing for the business fails, or anywhere along that there's a failure, basically, or the issuer of this particular security fails, then what you own is really not worth anything, or is worth substantially less. So just being aware of something called counterparty risk is really important, versus if you own a house, or if you own an apartment building, you own some real estate, you basically own that. Now you can say, well, the bank owns some of it, and you have to pay your mortgage, and you've got to make sure you're a good steward of it. But there are things that are built into owning real assets, especially these days, such as inflation protection, which there's some inflation protection in stocks. I believe, though, if you look at history, it does not keep up with inflation, at least in a time of inflation. They look at the 70s and 80s in the US. Inflation was very, very high as 15+% per year. And the stock market in real terms really didn't keep up. So I think having your money in different assets is important. And then another really important thing about things such as real estate is it allows you to use leverage in a healthy way. So you can put somewhere between 3 and 20% down on a house or on a building. And then, with an upside, let's just say you had $100,000 house and you put 20% down, and it basically went up by 20% to $120,000. Well, you've actually doubled your money because you only put 20,000 in, and now you have 40,000 in equity. So being able to use leverage is actually a real positive of getting into real assets such as real estate.
Great. Completely agree with you. It's all about diversifying. There's no such thing as one asset being better than others. They all have their pros and cons. As long as, once again, you educate yourself in the subject and make the decision that works best for you. Now, Bronson, I would like to ask you to clarify something for me, because we do have people from all kinds of financial level. And then there are two items that you mentioned earlier that they might not necessarily understand what they mean. So would you be able to please clarify what counterparty risk means for those who are brand new to the channel?
Yeah, so counterparty risk it sounds a little complex, but it basically is, it's as if, you have an asset or you have something you're buying, and in that process, there's someone else that actually holds or gives you right to be able to have whatever the product or the service or the stock or whatever it is. So for example, when stock is issued, it's typically issued by a large financial institution, and they're the ones that make that particular stock good. And so it's hard sometimes to get our heads around it, because we think of stocks or just, or bonds or other products, they really can't fail. But if the financial institution or the company fails, what it means is that the stock is not worth anything. it starts to have it goes from having worth to literally having zero worth. It's literally just paper. And so it's important to think about. Now, if you think of this in another term, a little bit outside of Wall Street, I know some streams that you and I run in Lucelia, they talk about things like physical metals, such as gold and silver. And there's a conversation for that if you own physical gold or silver, there's no counterparty risk. Now, it could get lost, it could get stolen, things like that, but you have it on that's your product. If you buy an ETF that invests in gold or silver, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I mean, there's some people that do it, and I've done it before, and I do it. But it's much more preferable to own the physical metal, because if I buy a share of an ETF that owns gold, typically they'll own 1 ounce of gold, and they'll sell 10 to 20 shares for that 1 ounce of gold. And you say, well, how does that make sense? But it's called fractional reserve banking. They basically they sell more than what they have. So let's say there's a run on, all of a sudden people just want to get a hold of the physical gold. Everybody sells. Well, there's not enough gold for everybody, and some people don't get paid. So it's something to really think about with the word counterparty risk. Is just, okay, where in this system could a bank fail, or where could a company fail, or where could the group holding this particular asset fail? And so that's why I do have a preference for physical assets, because there's less risk of counterparty risk, meaning if a bank fails, you still are on the title, you own this, and maybe the loan is sold to someone else, but you are the owner of the asset. So even in real estate, there's some ways to get around that as well.
Right. Perfect. I couldn't have explained it better. So thank you so much for clarifying. And you also mentioned leverage. So how would you explain leverage for those who are brand new to the channel?
Yeah. So leverage is just basically, if you think of, a lever is basically just something that you put I don't know what the word is, the fulcrum or the axis, you put something around it, you can lift heavy objects by being able to press on one side, and it gives you basically more force. And there's a saying by I don't remember which Greek god it was, but basically if you give me a lever big enough, I can move the entire earth. And so it's kind of the idea that you don't have to put 100% down to be able to buy real estate, especially in the US. And so one advantage, with an FHA loan on a single family house, you can put sometimes 3.5% down, or we buy large multifamily apartments in our business. And so we put typically 20 to 25% down. So what that means is, if it's a $10 million place, we're putting, $2 million to $2.5 million down. It allows us to get higher returns. These are cash flowing assets, and banks like it because they are able to give loans on these properties. They know it's a stable business. And that's why real estate, in some ways, one of the reasons it has an unfair advantage is because if you're using leverage, it allows you to get much higher returns. There is some additional risk there, but if you have a cash flowing asset that's producing money every month, generally it's perceived as being pretty safe to be in cash flowing assets with some leverage.
Great. Making money while you sleep, right? That's the mojo.
Exactly. Love Warren Buffett.
Right. So now, thank you for clarifying that as well. And so let's say, like I said, everybody does or chooses to do with their money whatever they please, because at the end of the day, it is their money, right? So let's assume we have part of the audience who says, you know what, Bronson, you sold me, real estate is the way to go. But what about the audience that still feels a little bit uncomfortable still to go out on their own? Let's say they still want to take baby steps and they want to reach out to a financial advisor just to get their feet wet. What would you recommend them to do? Like how should they go about it in terms of interviewing and selecting the right candidate to manage the money in a way that we can reduce that conflict of interest as much as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, everybody is we're all on our own journey. So again, this is the challenging thing about even doing a video like this is I don't know your personal situation. So I can't give you any specific advice about what you should do. And even legally, there's some issues with doing that, which I think is probably good. That's why, again, financial literacy is so important. But watching these videos and other videos from Novarise really help you to become more financially educated. So, but I would say if you feel like, hey, this is overwhelming, I have money, I need to figure out what to do with it. I prefer what's called a fee-based advisor. Typically, there's ones where you pay a certain amount. You pay a flat fee, saying I'm going to pay $1,000 or whatever to have a consultant, or have $500 to go have a meeting with someone to talk through all my assets, talk about my financial planning, do all that. I prefer that because, again, they're more fee based. Sometimes they charge a percentage or a certain amount per year to do that, but I prefer people that are less incentivized, like the big Wall Street firms that have, for example, let's say Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley, if you go see an advisor, they will try to put you into Morgan Stanley funds, which are some of those funds that I talked about, where they have fees from the advisor, there's free fees for the actual fund, and there's all these hidden fees. So I would stay away from someone like that, where it's some big firm, but you can find them. Typically, they're called registered investment advisors, and but you're looking for somebody who's more of a fee-based and less of a commission-based person. So I think that's something to look at. I personally think, if you were to buy an index fund, or you were to take a certain percentage, and again, watching some of these videos on how you allocate what you have, I think those are good ways to go. But I think if you do want to hire somebody to just talk through your finances, I think that's a good idea too.
That's actually a great tip. I never thought about it. In fact, I didn't even know they existed. I didn't know you can just do a one-time consultation based on a fee. So now, where would they go and find those type of advisors? Can they just simply go online? Do they have to go to a specific company? Like, how would they find those experts?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. I would say one way, the best person to talk to is if you have a CPA or you have a tax person that you trust, or maybe even you have a friend or family that's got a good CPA. CPAs are really well connected to a lot of financial people. So they're going to know people to talk to. And what you're looking for what's called a fee-based advisor or registered investment advisor, and somebody that doesn't sell specific products, but they are either do a one-time consult fee, or they do wealth management as a one-time fee. So those are a couple of ways you can kind of look at it. You can obviously search online. You can search on Yelp. You can do different things. But I would say just in general, referrals are huge. So again, if you ask friends or family, do you have a CPA? Do you have a registered investment advisor? That's a good way to go. But know that if you just start calling people, they're gonna try to set up a meeting and try to get you in. So they'll try to get you in just so that they can meet you. So, but yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a trick. There's no master list that I know of where that exists. It probably does somewhere, but I just know that there are groups out there that do that.
Great stuff. So thank you for sharing, Bronson. Now, on to the fun part of things. How did you do the transition, and what made you want to do it? I mean, you shared briefly the reasons why, but what motivates you to just completely make the jump, and what is it that you're doing right now today with your investments? Share with all of us.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. It's I just last Friday, actually, so a week ago, I just completely finished my I got a great job in medical consulting. I'm doing it 10 years, and I really enjoyed it. But it was just something that, even though I was making really good money, over six figures doing it, working probably 20 hours a week. But to me, I really wanted to get to a place where I was financially free. And I saw a lot of people doing what I did, as well as physicians. There's some physicians that I worked with that made millions of dollars a year, literally, but they would work 60 to 80 hours a week every week. And I realized financial freedom is not just, having tons of money. It's basically having freedom over your time, because your time is really the most important asset. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. And so for somebody watching this or listening, it's really important to think, if you had more time, what would you do? Most people, I think it's like 65% of people don't like their jobs. And so to be able to have autonomy over your time, to be able to create things, to be able to create videos for me around this topic. I'm so passionate about it, helping other people become financially free. We have investors that work with us, and we go buy apartment buildings. And it's just so much fun to be able to pursue that and to be able to do stuff that I feel is really in alignment with my values. So I'm really excited about it. Obviously, everything we do in life is a risk, but as my passive income built up, it basically got to where it covers my expenses. And then I can basically start to go do more deals and do more things that will allow me to grow more into the future. But it is hard to know like what the right time is to leave your job when you start getting passive income, or when you start making money on a side hustle. And so I could have left about a year and a half ago before COVID, but I decided to hold on, and it was probably fine. I was disappointed when COVID happened. I was pretty upset, but I was like, you know what, everything happens for a reason, and I'm really excited now that I'm able to leave.
Yeah, it's certainly very scary but at the same time is very rewarding. So I'm glad that you are there now, that you are free to control your time the way you find it the most productive for you and your business, and that you're actually choosing to spend some time with us today as well. So thank you so much for that. And for those who actually want to find out and want to learn more about Bronson, here's the link right here on the screen where you can actually tune in and check out his YouTube channel as well. He is fully devoted to educating, just like we are devoted to education as well. He's very passionate about it. He's got some really, really great content that you can definitely check out. And he's got even great guests on it that you will be super, super happy to be seeing them and seeing that engagement and their conversation. So is there anything else more that you would like to share with everybody here today, Bronson?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the biggest thing you can do is educate yourself. I love what you guys are doing as far as educating people about financial stuff. And again, I really personally believe it's actually a real core value of getting people outside of Wall Street and into Main Street. So just love what you're doing. You can feel free to reach out. And yeah, look forward to connecting with everybody on YouTube or different places. So it's been a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you so much, Bronson. And hopefully we'll connect soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.